Let me first say that I usually stay a little bit afterwards because I like to talk to people or they come up to me. This message is on transition. Who isn't going through that? But there could very well be somebody here who's going through it. And I'm willing to stay as long as possible because Trader Joe's will remain open for me afterwards. We're going to have a piece of pottery up on the screen, which I find incredibly beautiful. There we go. I have an artist friend who's creating something, I don't think like that, but kintsugi, that's the Japanese art, which I find very intriguing, of repairing broken pottery with gold. An amended piece is believed to be more beautiful, more valuable, and stronger because it's been transformed through suffering. So in a way, we're all kintsugi. We're all more beautiful. We're all hopefully stronger as we've gone through some tough times, and everybody does. When life breaks you, it's because you're ready to be put back together differently. Every piece of you that feels shattered is a piece that will find a new place, a new purpose, a new meaning. Trust that the cracks are where the light gets in. And sometimes I have found in our brokenness, we find our greatest wholeness. We find the courage to rebuild. We find the courage to reimagine. We find the courage to redefine what it means to be strong. We are not broken. You are breaking through. And it's important that we remind ourselves of that. Anne Morrow Lindbergh, wife of Charles Lindbergh, who went through a lot of trials herself in her life, she wrote this: "Don't wish me happiness. I don't expect to be happy all the time. It's gotten beyond that somehow. Wish me courage. Wish me strength and a sense of humor. I will need them all." And I thought about all the transitions or maybe hard times I've gone through. That would take days to share, so I won't. And I won't go into great detail, but a couple that just came to mind, ironically come to mind, because it was when I came down with amnesia on December 15th, 2010. It was one of those years. I don't know if you are any workaholics or former workaholics in here. I have been one. And I was a chaplain of a hospice team that had 160 patients. There was just two chaplains. And our territory, believe it or not, went from Kokomo to Bloomington. I did that. I still had my weekly radio show where every week I had new interviews. I didn't just play an old show. And a church had reached out to me to be a candidate for their minister. And I thought, cool, I used to do that. I kind of missed that. So I put my name in that. And that took a lot of meetings and involvement and preparation. Long story short, and unbeknownst to me, by December 15th, by then I took my name out of candidacy. I realized it wouldn't be a good fit for me. And so what did Richard decide to do? I don't know. Let's create another movement. Let's do that and create something new because that's how I function. Somewhere during the meeting, I came down with amnesia actually before, because a dear friend of mine who's always been involved in everything I've done, Michael Atwood, used to be a host of Across Indiana. He said, I was in the bathroom for a long time. I came out, walked to him, and I said, I don't know who I am or where I'm at. He took me to Community North Hospital. They diagnosed me as transient global amnesia. That's a catch-all for they don't really know what happened. And I woke up about, I'd say 10 hours later. So I don't remember the dinner I had with a friend, don't remember the drive to our friend's house that was hosting this meeting. My kids were all called because I had one close friend that I just had the number in my phone. I just dialed it. They called all my kids, my four kids. I guess they were sitting in there. Don't remember them being there. And when I finally woke up, it's like this, what? And a couple quick things happened. It was late at night. Everyone was gone except my friend Jay. And all of a sudden, and I don't know why, I just started laughing. like uncontrollably. And I thought about a guest I had on my radio show. And he had been an international president of a thing called Unity. And now he was teaching consciousness in business. And I loved this guy. So it was a good thing. But he was part of a group at the time called Transformational Leadership Council, big in California, of course, with all these top New Thought leaders. And I don't know why I said this. Of course, I don't know why I came down with amnesia. And I said, well, who made him a transformational leader? You know, why not that little old lady I saw in a nursing home and her eyes were so blue and she was so godly and I was just drawn to her and she didn't even say a word. And Jay, who was my witness to all of this, I just saw humor in that. And then I thought to myself, because I realized then I was so serious about everything, being a minister, being a coach, being a hospice chaplain, being a radio, serious, that I said, you know, we're all just one step away from a Saturday Night Live skit. Our spirituality, right? As an activist, I was always on the front lawns, racial reconciliation, homelessness. I look back on my life and that lasted for a while. And then Jay was going to leave and let my dog Harley out to go pee. Oh yeah, Harley, he's still at home, my dog. And in the early morning hours in a hospital, and I had a room to myself, it's kind of dark, very quiet. And it was that time that Spirit spoke to me. I call it Spirit. 8 times it's happened this way, this loudly, because I didn't hear it, but it was like a loving mother, father leaning into my ear. And this time the phrase was, it's stop. It's time to stop. And I instantly had tears flowing down me. And the insight I got from that phrase was, Richard, stop working so hard. Stop thinking, stop processing, stop analyzing, stop controlling. It was a list. Stop. It's time to stop. And I know this is going to sound crazy, but I feel like I had spiritual surgery on my head. I felt light as a feather. I got released later that day, went home. I sat in my office. It's back when I had even more books than I do now. And I turned and saw another book. This is the second time this has happened to me. And I started chuckling because this was a book that was a bestseller. Always had to buy the bestsellers. Borders loved me, by the way, when I saw they bowed down when Richard came in. He had a credit card in his hand. And I laughed because I started to read it and I didn't get it at all as I put it back on the shelf. So I pulled it out. In the entire day, I devoured this book. It was called The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle. And I got it. And he talked about how our minds, basically, we can be addicted to our thoughts. And it started to change my life completely. I literally felt like I could just walk on air. And I was becoming more and more present with just the trees in my yard and the neighborhood. And then the mistake I made, of course, was because I felt bad for the other chaplain, rather than get a doctor to give me a whole month off, which he said later he would have, I went back to work because she can't do it alone. I got to be there to help. And occasionally I'll fall back into that trap to this day. But my mantra now is stop. It's time to stop. That crisis, if you will, because I'm very aware I lost my memory. And then humor, because it was about 2 weeks later when he knew it was safe to do this, Mike Atwood came up to me and said, I knew you were a head case. Mike's sarcastic humor. Fast forward 3 now years, Mike had a brain aneurysm, almost died at Methodist Hospital. I would visit him for almost a year at a couple of different rehab places in Carmel. For the longest time, he couldn't walk, couldn't talk. Finally, he got his speech back. And last time I taught at Oaklandon Unitarian, Mike showed up. And he walks with a cane a little bit, but he can walk. His mind is sharp now. His sarcastic humor is still there. And I thought it was safe enough for me to say, Mike, I always knew you were a head case. I just didn't want to share it early on. I'm glad you're okay. The other thing that happened to me that I want to share with some of you, because some of you are going through this, is when my dad died. My dad was in room 420, bed A, at Greenwood Meadows. We couldn't take care of him any longer. We put him in there. I was afraid he was going to linger. He had dementia. I went off what I thought was going to be a 4-day retreat. Nurses told me that he would linger for a long time. He died my second day. I was away, came back. You know, you can't grieve in 3 days. Companies give you 3 days. It takes 3 days to plan a funeral. That's a whole nother topic. But my point is this. When I come back to work, the very first patient I have to see, a new patient, is in my dad's room, in my dad's bed. I will never forget that. 420, bed A. When I walked in there knowing this was going to happen, I remember how surreal that felt. And I didn't know whether to laugh and see the humor in it or just cry. And it wasn't until I listened to a podcast, Stephen Colbert and Anderson Cooper talking about grief. And I realized, Mr. Hospice Chaplain, Mr. Leading Grief Groups, I never fully grieved the death of my dad. I had to learn how to do that. There's a guy who teaches that. But this time it was me. But it transformed me into a softer, kinder, more sensitive person when people are going through it in hard times. So I began to see the beauty in those things. So piggybacking on Ann's quote, don't wish me happiness, for I no longer expect it to be a constant companion. Life has taught me that happiness comes and goes like waves on a shore. Instead, wish me courage to face life's challenges, strength to endure its trials, and a sense of humor to keep me light in dark moments. These are the tools I will need as I navigate the unpredictability of the journey that we all have ahead. Happiness will find its way back, but courage and resilience will carry me through. So, what are some examples of transition? Sometimes people hear that phrase. Life transition is any change. It's job loss. Life transition is a new job. It can be the death of a loved one. It can be the death of a dream. Some of you probably have had that and it didn't work out. It can be the death of a marriage or a relationship, separation. It can be birth. It can be health problems. It can be political problems. In some way, I think our country is grieving because of what's happening in our country. And moving even to a new location, I have found to be true because it's new neighborhood, new house, new things. We underestimate these things, and I can't emphasize that stronger. And we're aware of it, but I think we keep it up here and then we let it go. We don't let it, I always say this, we don't let that knowledge of that transfer from our head into our heart, which is illumination. And it's only in illumination that we truly can have change. And so it's important to know when we're going through those transitions, because just think about it. We were all born to die. As we get older, we slow down. We will go through these things from time to time. So what are some coping strategies? I won't go into in depth with some of this, but find your tribe. No, if you have a tribe, that's great. But if you don't, right now, find your tribe. That can be family, that can be a dear friend or two. And I found to the case that there's only probably a couple of friends that I would feel safe enough to come out to, because I know no matter what I share, no matter how dark the depression might have been, they won't judge me. But know you have some people like that in your life. And if you don't, have a therapist, have a coach, have a mentor. I do. I see Karen every month and I look forward to those sessions because she can bust me like nobody else. And I pay her to do that. And it helps in the growth and transformation. Practice mindfulness. I've always known about that, prayer, walking meditation. I learned that from Thich Nhat Hanh. That's my favorite. I love to go into the woods. I'm a nature guy, and nothing calms me down more than being amongst the trees, the water, things like that. Embrace the unknown. The older I get, the more I see that everything's a mystery. One of my favorite teachers, Richard Rohr, often talks about that in his writings. Embracing the mystery of life, embracing the mystery of death. We don't know what's going to happen. And there's something powerful when we learn to let go of our need to be in control, to know everything, to know all the steps, because chances are A curveball is going to come in. A wave is going to come into your shore, and you won't know how to handle that. So start embracing the unknown a little bit. Self-care. And that's pretty practical, but we often don't do it. We talk about that on our hospice team often because they're caregivers, always out there. Usually we're the last ones to take care of. Healthy eating, sleep is a big deal. I've been studying that actually, so I can even sleep better. Exercise. Here's something else that I put in my invisible toolbox when I work with clients. I talk about an invisible toolbox where you always have something in there with you at all times while you're in the car, walking, wherever. And that's quotes, aspirations, have music in your phone. Nothing gets me out of the doldrums more than music. I think it was Tony Robbins that talked about pattern interrupts. In other words, do something physical, jump up and down. I walk every day, not a runner, but I love walking every day, anything physical, but music. Because I love music, and music has a way, and music therapy reminds us of this. It has a way of just touching our souls and the endorphins and everything else. So make sure you have music around you all the time, already chosen. That's really important. Put that in your toolbox because music can provide strength and resilience through difficult times. I've always been intrigued by people who've modeled strength through difficult times, who've modeled resilience through difficult times. Now, as a little boy, I grew up in Springfield, Illinois. So I was indoctrinated into the life of Abraham Lincoln. When I was a Cub Scout, we walked the Lincoln Pilgrimage every year. My grandmother and my grandfather had a house right across the street from the park where Oak Ridge Cemetery is. So I would often go to the grave of Lincoln. I have probably read every book written about Lincoln. That's why I'm a Civil War buff, because I find his life fascinating. But I wanted to share this with you. And think about resilience, think about strength, maybe think about what you've gone through, what you're going through now. Lincoln was born into poverty in 1809. In 1816, Lincoln's family was forced out of their home and he had to go to work to support them. In 1818, his mother died. In 1831, he failed in business. In 1832, he ran for state legislature and lost. In 1832, he lost his job. That same year, he decided he wanted to go to law school, but his application was rejected. In 1833, Lincoln borrowed some money from a friend to begin a business, but by the end of the year, he was bankrupt. He spent the next 17 years paying off that debt. In 1834, he ran for the state legislature again, and he lost. In 1835, he was engaged to be married. Anne Rutledge, that was his true love. He was engaged to be married, but his fiancée died, and it broke his heart. In 1836, Lincoln suffered a total nervous breakdown and was confined to his bed for 6 months. In 1838, he sought to become Speaker of the state legislature again and was defeated again. In 1840, he sought to become elector and was defeated. In 1843, he ran for Congress and lost. In 1846, he ran for Congress again. This time he won, finally made his way to Washington, only in the next election to lose it again. In 1849, he sought the job of land officer, but was rejected. In 1854, he ran for Senate of the United States and lost. In 1856, he sought the vice presidential nomination at his party's national convention. He got less than 100 votes and lost. In 1858, he ran for the United States Senate again and lost again. Then in 1860, Lincoln decided to run for president. Based on what? His track record? He won. And I believe went on to become one of the greatest presidents in the history of the United States and one of the finest models of leadership in modern times. In a speech, Lincoln said, "The path was worn and slippery. My foot slipped from under me, knocking the other foot out of the way, but I recovered and said to myself, it's a slip, not a fall. Now, the other thing to think about, what kept him going, is he always had a sense of his destiny. No matter what knocked him down, he had a sense to keep going, that he was there for a purpose greater than himself. He always knew that. So knowing your calling, knowing your purpose, which can be a general thing, is really, really important, because in my life, that's what's got me through every time. Until I die, I want to inspire as many hearts and minds as I can. That's all I care about, which is why if you're on my Facebook page, I rarely post anything political, although I have my opinions. I will always try to post something inspirational that will give somebody hope out there, because I know somebody is going through it, just as I often do, but people won't know that because my posts are always inspiring. But I have other friends I can talk to with that as well. So in closing, I want to share a blessing. This blessing was written by Elizabeth Lesser, who was the co-founder of Omega Institute. She often talked in her teachings and from other teachers that she gleaned who went to Omega about the beat, like the beat of the drum in our heart. You could almost call it intuition as well. But she writes this: may you listen to the voice within the beat, even when you're tired. When you feel yourself breaking down, may you break and open instead. May you experience in life be a door that opens your heart, expands your understanding, and leads you to freedom. If you're weary, may you be aroused by hope and humor. If you're frightened, may you be emboldened by a big consciousness far wiser than you fear. If you're lonely, may you find love. May you find friendship. If you're lost, may you understand in some way we're all lost, and still we are guided by strange angels and sleeping giants, by our better and kinder natures, by the vibrant voice within the beat. May you follow that voice, for this is the way, the hero's journey, the life worth living, the reason we are all here. Love and peace to you all.